Our Lady of Fatima, pray for us. This is the Terry and Jesse show. My partner's out doing some apostolic work. I've got with me a guest, John Clark. John Clark is a columnist. He's a political speechwriter and a ghostwriter. He's authored 2 books on fatherhood and written approximately 500 articles and blogs about Catholic family and apologetics in such places as the National Catholic Register, Seton Magazine, and Magis Center. He's also an online course developer for Seton Home Study School. He was homeschooled by his mother, Dr. Mary K. Clark. I read some of her books. And he holds a degree in political science and economics from Christendom College, one of the great colleges in the U.S. He and his wife, Lisa, have 9 children and live in Central Florida in the great state of Florida. Yeah, John, welcome, my friend. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So you just wrote my friend, you just wrote a book through 10. It's called Betrayed Without a Kiss, Defending Marriage After Years of Failed Leadership in the Church. By the way, we don't want to confuse John's book with another book called Heal Me With Your Mouth, The Art of Kissing by Archbishop Victor Fernandez. Not the same book. Not the same book.
No.
Okay. No. Yeah. So, John, tell us, interesting title, Betrayed Without a Kiss, Defending Marriage After Years of Failed Leadership in the Church. Wow. You said a mouthful with that title. Why did you decide to write this book, and why did you choose that title?
So thanks for asking me. I really appreciate that. So the way this all started, I would say a few years ago, a friend of mine was going through some difficult times with this marriage. Looked like a divorce might be on the horizon. And he came to me for some advice. And I really wanted to investigate what was going on with some of the, like he would tell me oddities. For instance, that in the diocese he was in, the diocese mandated a civil divorce prior to even having an annulment hearing. Imagine that. So before you can even sit down with the marriage tribunal, you have to present them with a certificate that you have had a civil divorce. And when he told me that story, I thought, that can't possibly be true. How could a bishop require civil divorce? And of course, he was correct. And then I went on to discover that every diocese that I'm aware of, that is to say, every diocese in America requires civil divorce prior to even having an annulment hearing, right? As to determine whether your marriage is valid. You would have to have the state saying, in effect, from a legal perspective, that it is not, that the marriage is over, the contract is over. So when I started looking into that, that's kind of what started this process. And I really wanted to delve into from there, what was going on. And when I came up with a title pretty early on, and somebody said to me, "Betrayed Without a Kiss," that's pretty rough. The more I researched this, I thought, no, that's pretty accurate. So this is simply that's what started the process. So, John, I can see where you're going with this. The fact is that right now in the church, probably in every diocese and every tribunal, they require, like you just said, a civil divorce before they will start even looking at an annulment, the tribunal. And so I guess now I see where your title's coming from, is you're trying to defend marriage from the failed leadership right now in our church, because instead of trying to bring reconciliation to the couple and harmony and unity, they're like, well, hey, go get a civil divorce and then we'll take a look at it. That's painful, but I've heard this story over and over again. The story you just told me, I've heard this dozens of times. I have no personal knowledge, thanks be to God, but very good Catholic friends of mine have told me that what you said is exactly what happens at the average diocesan tribunal. Right. And the key, so if you want to look at numbers, you go back to the late 1960s, the church was granting about 350 annulments per year. That's all dioceses combined, about 350. You fast forward a generation or so, and you have 70,000 annulments in a year. So 350 to 70,000. So just in terms of the numbers there, that's alarming. However you look at it, this is something is not working. We know that the sacrament of matrimony is not broken. We know that sacraments don't break, but the process is broken. And when you start looking at that, so in one generation, we went from 350 annulments to 70,000. In two generations, we've gone from the church, about the late 60s, the church granted something like 425,000 weddings. There were 425,000 weddings in America. In the year 2020, there were fewer than 100,000 weddings. So if you start graphing that in your mind, you think, okay, you start graphing the annulments, that looks pretty, way up, and you start looking at marriages the way down, there's a problem. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So this book is sort of bringing some of these facts to light and trying to discuss what we can do.
John, so you said that the church would grant about 350 annulments a year. This was like before the 60s, before the council, would you say?
Yes, but I wouldn't link it to the Second Vatican Council. What I would say is that Vatican II, the documents of Vatican II, could have outlined marriage better. It's true. But the Second Vatican Council did not change the primary purpose of matrimony. So it's a key distinction. I'm just pointing it out because a lot of times people go and say, yeah, okay.
Yeah, no. I don't think it was Vatican II. There's a lot of turbulence in the 60s. You had the sexual revolution. You had Griswold versus Connecticut, the legalization of birth control. You had pornography. Hugh Hefner opened up his enterprise. Larry Flint opened his enterprise. Pornography was legalized by the Supreme Court in 1968 on the big screen. You had public schools taking away, homeroom prayer, taking away Bible reading in homeroom. You had the Church of Satan cropping up. You had the Vietnam War. There's a lot of social chaos in the 60s. And so I can see that that's probably the marker where this started breaking, this started falling apart. Okay, now, here's something interesting. How has your own marriage, you seem like you're a solid Catholic man, Christendom College, you got a Dr. Mary Kay Clark is your mom. It seems like I just obviously Tan picked up your book. You're a well-formed Catholic in terms of your theology. How is it that your own marriage has shaped this book?
Well, I appreciate that. So my wife and I just celebrated our 31st wedding anniversary. And frankly, I don't know that I would have had the credentials to write this without being married for a long time. I mean, I think that where we're at now is I think we're in a position where the laity needs to evangelize priests on this issue. And that might sound odd, but here's the thing. So right now in America, I think it's worldwide, right? So we're having Eucharistic revival. It's great. That's fantastic. It's a beautiful thing. I'm glad we're doing it. The problem is that if the Eucharistic revival is not accompanied by a matrimonial one, that is to say, a celebration of the sacrament of matrimony, I wonder how much fruit it will bear. And here's what it comes down to, in just a very simple way. Words matter. This is my body matters. I do matters. And so we have to remember that matrimony, like the Eucharist, like all seven sacraments, matrimony is a sacrament, and we have just lost sight of that. So I'm glad I can bring some experience to it. And because I think after 30 years, I've raised 9 children who we've homeschooled. So as you mentioned, Mary Kay Clark is my mom. So that's what we do in the Clark family. So, but I think that brings some credibility to it. I hope that it does.
John, you remind me of a quote from Fulton Sheen back in the 70s. He said, who's going to save our church? Not our bishops, not our priests, not our religious. It's you, the lay people. He said, you lay people teach your priests how to be priests. You lay people teach your bishops how to be bishops. What you just said right now is just strikingly similar to what Fulton Sheen just said. So what can priests do? You're right. Without a marriage revival, so to speak, or a marriage rebirth or renaissance, there is going to be no Eucharistic revival. They're connected. You're right. This is my body given up for you. That's what happens in marriage. That's part of the vows. You're giving yourself this mutual reciprocity, this exchange of self, and that's also what happens in the Holy Eucharist. Christ is giving himself to us. Without a marriage revival in the U.S. or in the Catholic Church, there will be no Eucharistic revival. So, what can priests do to help marriage go forward and bring about this renaissance and rebirth?
That's a great question, and that's the key to this in large measure, is that priests need to speak about the primary purpose of matrimony. That would be great. Priests need to speak about the good of marriage. It's funny, I mentioned to people that I in 52 years, we go to, obviously Mass on Sundays. We try to go to daily Mass whenever we can. And I'm trying to count the number of times I've heard sermons about marriage. I mean, I don't remember ever hearing, well, the primary purpose of marriage is the procreation and education of children. That is a doctrine that is infallible. I don't remember hearing that. And yet, I sometimes wonder who the priests think their audience is. I mean, presumably, this is mostly married people with children. So priests need to speak favorably. Priests need to be cheerleaders for marriage. And I think that, there was sort of a trial balloon that came out a couple of years ago about the idea that the problem is the pre-cana. So the pre-cana should last maybe, 14, 16 months. Well, I don't think that's actually fair, because there is a natural law right to marriage. It's too long. But realistically, if the idea is that we have to educate people on the faith, I agree 100%. My question is, why do the priests wait until pre-cana to do it? My idea is this. How about if priests gave sermons on what to look for in a good spouse? That sermon should occur before dating, much less marriage, right? So, I mean, that's a conversation we have, Lisa and I have with our children. But I think if it comes from the pulpit, it's so much better. So the pre-cana should really be expanded to infancy. I'd say in my book, my first pre-cana teachers were my mom and dad, who loved each other, that took care of me. And I think that if we need to look at marriage that way, we need to look at the beauty of marriage. And to your point of reconciliation, that's a key part of this too. Reconcile, forgive one another. It's true for married couples too.
Amen. Hey, we got John Clark on here on the Terry and Jesse show. He just wrote a book. It's called Betrayed Without a Kiss, Defending Marriage After Years of Failed Leadership in the Church. This is definitely a book you want to pick up and read and share with other people. You can get the book at 10books.com, 10books.com. The book is called Betrayed Without a Kiss, 10books.com.